What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the SEC West betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, is Colin Wilson. This is the last of our preseason betting conference previews. If you have missed the other 10, including the SEC East, which we just recorded, make sure you check those out. I'm really excited to do this one because we have Alabama, we have Arkansas and Dan Enos, we have Texas A&M and your boy Petrino, your LSU love, Ole Miss and Lane. I mean, this is just going to be Hugh Freeze in the mix. It's going to be an electric episode. If you missed, we kind of introduced the SEC, by the way, in the start of the other episode. But Colin, you also just told me right before we started recording, you have an announcement. Which I have no idea what it's going to be. Do you want to say that now, later?
Well, let's get this out of the way first. Woo Pig Suey.
That's your announcement?
No, I spent 17 years living in the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I spent the rest of my life before that in Northwest Arkansas on campus, Walmart land, everything. I moved back a month ago. I live not too far away from campus. I live on a pretty big name golf course. Eric Musselman was golfing in my backyard today with Ronnie Brewer, Nolan Richardson, and the rest of the team that's going to be on the court this year. I am right back into the loop of everything Razorbacks, from proximity, physicality, everything. The wife and I brought the teens over. We're ready for them to go to college at Arkansas. They're going to get their pre-law degrees. I even asked Kevin Trainor if I could start going to Sam Pittman and Eric Musselman's press conferences. The answer was, yeah, I'll get you set up.
Wow.
I am so happy to be home. Woo Pig Suey. This podcast is home to me. I couldn't be more fired up. Let's go.
Congratulations, brother. And everyone cast their tickets for mentions of Woo Pig Suey, Arkansas football, Arkansas basketball, Nolan Richardson, press conferences, all within the first 5 minutes of the show. But congratulations on getting him off to come visit you sometime soon. I'm very happy for you, though. It's awesome news. And yeah, it's going to be sick to get
come to Arkansas
access.
Duke. Come to Bud Walton for Arkansas Duke. Let's just go tear it up. 94 national championship rematch.
I'm in. Let's set it up. When is that? Do you know? We'll talk about it off there. All right, so let's get into the SEC West, which is going to be an electric episode. I'm really excited for this one. For what it's worth, we did intro the SEC, kind of the landscape, the lay of the land, if you will, at the beginning of the SEC East episode. Which we didn't mention is the national title odds. Teams that are 40-1 or less to win the national title in the SEC are Georgia plus 225 at BetMGM. Alabama 6-1, LSU 12-1, Tennessee 35-1, and Texas A&M 40-1. As far as the SEC West odds are concerned, Alabama is the favorite to win the division at plus 105. LSU is second at plus 175. But let's start with those Crimson Tide, plus 260 to win the SEC overall. Win total over 10, minus 155. You also can find a heavily juiced under 10.5, depending on what tickles your fancy. They draw Tennessee at home on a rematch, revenge game, and at Kentucky on a rare trip to Lexington from the SEC East. They will host LSU and Ole Miss, but will go to Texas A&M and Auburn. This Alabama team, I will tell you, I just tweeted this out earlier today. The last time that they lost at home by 7 or more points was in 2007 to Louisiana Monroe. It's been a team that's been absolutely dominant at home under Saban. I think 5 losses over the past 12 years. And those losses came against pretty much all Heisman Trophy winners. Burrow in 2019, Johnny Manziel. Who else is in there? Chad Kelly. They lost a 9-6 game in overtime to LSU. I
Yep.
know that.
Game of the
So,
century.
and Cam Newton. That's it. So Alabama's been dominant at home, and that'll be tested this year because they get Ole Miss at home. They get Texas at home. They get LSU at home. I guess I should mention Arkansas as well.
Yes.
And as I mentioned before, they go to Kentucky, to Auburn, to Texas A&M, to Mississippi State. And oddly enough, they go to South Florida, one of the weirdest scheduling quirk games of the year. This team has questions, unlike past Alabama teams, but they haven't lost more than 2 games, including bowls and college football playoff, since 2010 when they were the defending champs.
Who was the quarterback?
And they lost 2010.
I'm pretty sure. I actually am about 90% sure it was Greg McElroy.
Yeah, I was going to say McElroy. McElroy was the quarterback the year before too. And when they won the national title,
right?
I believe, yeah, in 2009. Yeah, McElroy. McElroy was definitely McElroy. And then they lost 3 games that year. But this team definitely has questions. This is not your typical, hey, look, this Alabama team is going to be dominant. Number one, they have 2 new coordinators. Tommy Rees comes over from Notre Dame. Kevin Steele, who many know from Auburn, will come over and coach the defense. The offense, you got to start the quarterback position. Bryce Young, who I love, all world, goes to the NFL. You lose him, you lose Gibbs at running back, you lose your best defender, the 3rd overall pick, and Will Anderson. So there's questions all over this roster, starting with the quarterback position. O-line is also still a concern. It's finally an experienced wide receiver room, but like it's not the wide receiver rooms of 2 to 3 years ago.
Right. Will there ever
lose
be
2
one like that again? They'll never. I don't think there ever will be. So
yeah, you lose 2 safeties, the NFL in battle like that. So linebackers definitely down a notch after you lose a couple. But they obviously have loaded recruiting classes coming in. But let's start with the quarterback position, where it's either going to be Jaden Milroe, redshirt freshman Ty Simpson, who seems to be the leader in the clubhouse right now, probably the one who makes the most cerebral decisions from what I've read. But you also had Tyler Buchner, who came in from Notre Dame, notable because that's where Tommy Rees came from, making this 3-way competition. Maybe you'll see some of each, depending on what it is. A lot of questions on this roster. Obviously, still super talented. Obviously, still clearly in the national title discussion. Clearly a top 10, top 5 at the ceiling, top 3. But if they've fallen off a bit, that means like they're now going to end up in that 7 to 10. I'm talking of the top 10 teams, 6, 7, 8, 9, instead of 1, 2, 3. And instead of winning 11, 12, maybe they only win 9 to 10 games this year. What are you seeing with this Alabama team?
Yeah, the quarterback situation, we could spend hours on this, and I know there's a lot of other people that are spending hours on this trying to break this down. But the plain and simple fact is that they have 3 different options, and I think all 3 of them do things better than the other. Different. I mean, they're all different. None of them are the same. Generally, you want a backup quarterback to run the playbook of your starting quarterback, but we don't have that here. I saw Jalen Milroe hit an outside zone quarterback keeper and take off down the sidelines at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. And I think I've ever seen a quarterback run that fast. And I was there live in person for Johnny Manziel. Jalen Milroe has got to be the fastest quarterback in the league. But do you play him against a havoc-minded defense like LSU? No. You play him against a weak defensive front 7 like Ole Miss. Ty Simpson is the most cerebral. You don't want any havoc in the game. That's who you play against LSU. So we have 3 different quarterbacks. And I made a tweet today about carrot cake. And Saban's not going to tell us who it is. And unless somebody's filming off those high-rise apartments that overlooks the practice field, we're not going to know who it is. And it's going to be a big mislead leading up to Middle Tennessee. And I guarantee you, every single one of those quarterbacks is going to play against Middle Tennessee. But
you probably don't want to show your hand before Texas the week after.
We're not going to get anything about this Alabama team until they play Texas. And Saban said it's like a carrot cake. I used to stand by Grandma Saban's oven. I look at that carrot cake. I wanted to eat that carrot cake. She said it's got to sit. It's got to stay in the oven. It's not ready. And he's going to keep to that until that Texas game. So I will say there are multiple pieces here. I don't like Tyler Buchner at all. Haven't seen enough of Ty Simpson. and Jalen Milroe can run the inside zone. He could run the RPO, right? We
He's
don't know.
definitely limited as a passer from
Extreme, right? But they have pieces. My question comes with Tommy Rees. Nick Saban gets the media days, says Tommy Rees may be the brightest, best offensive coordinator. What else is he going to say when he comes in? My problem is all I've seen is Tommy Rees run a 12 formation with Ian Book dumping off to Michael Mayer. That's all I've ever seen out of Notre Dame, and a pretty stiff running attack. Has Saban decided that to kill some of these 3-3-5 drop 8 defenses, he's going to go back to running the ball? I don't know. You've got Ja'Cory Brooks and Jermaine Burton averaging over 2 yards per route run on the outside. That's explosive. They have a lot of weapons everywhere. And JC Latham looking at me and telling me, we hear you. The whole entire offensive line, the whole entire team hears the narrative about Alabama football, about how we're done. We hear you. They're pissed off every day. I mean, Saban, everybody is feeding this team exactly what Saban wants. The rat poison. They're going to be pissed off. The floor for this team is 10 wins. The ceiling for this team is 12. I'm not playing a win total on these guys. Mathematically, I would say you need to take the under, but it's heavily juiced, which means there's probably some value on taking the over. But at the same time, just it's a depressed market against LSU. What is that, a pick? I'm not so sure that, Texas is going to come in and win that game. That's a huge step up for Quinn Ewers and environment. I mean, they were at home last year. Their defensive line was all over Bryce Young. We'll see. So expected tempo decrease with Tommy Rees, although Saban did say that Tommy Rees is going to run the same offense that Alabama's already had. I expect a huge bump in rush rate. Everything that I can read, they want to establish to run the ball again. So I think games may go a little bit slower, but that doesn't mean they're going to stop scoring a whole bunch of points. Now, they were 123rd in penalties. I said that was a problem for Tennessee. It was a problem for Alabama. They were extremely undisciplined last year. We got to see if that rebounds. It was the worst. And I went back 20 years. 20 years. Alabama has never had a season that bad in penalties. Do they rebound? They should. They draw Tennessee and Kentucky from the East. A little bit of a revenge going on there with Tennessee. We'll see what time of day that Kentucky game falls. Kevin Steele comes in as defensive coordinator. You can expect 31% blitz. It's kind of aggressive, but he only got 40% success at Miami. Does that say something about Kevin Steele, or does it say something about the Miami Hurricanes defense? I don't know. Kevin Steele has not been that impressive in his tenure throughout the SEC and the other stops that he's had, but we'll see what he can do with his cover 3 and his nickel package. So I'm not fading them, Stuck. If they went 12-0, I wouldn't be surprised. If they went 10-2, I wouldn't be surprised. They won 9 games, I'd be shocked. I don't like the pieces. But even Sark said they're big, they're huge, they're fast, they're a problem. And they're still a problem. Even with these underwhelming coordinator hires, it's still a system that hasn't changed. They haven't changed the way they're doing things. It hasn't changed the culture. They haven't changed the playbook that much on defense or offense. And Saban is very telling with Pete Golding leaving for Ole Miss, and that wasn't even immediate. That was after Saban went off to the side and had the little room. Pete had to make a decision that was best for Pete and what he thought would advance his career. It's exactly what Saban said. It's not easy working for Saban. That's why we got coordinators coming in every 1 to 2 years, virtually rolling out a carpet for Tosh Chapoy. Get out of here. It's not easy working for this guy, but he demands elite. I expect him to be elite. The problem is can Tommy Rees call an offense to get them to be explosive on the outside with Burton and Brooks? It's a huge question because Milroe can't get him the ball. I'm interested in your take. LSU, the only teams that can beat him here, maybe Texas. That's the path. Those are the 3 teams that can get them.
Yeah, but if you look at this schedule, like I'm not a believer in the quarterback position right now, which is just massive. It's a huge drop off from Bryce Young. Yeah. There are still questions of defense too. Obviously, there's a lot of talent, but at linebacker, safety, even one corner spot. But part of the offensive line, the offensive coordinator, a lot of questions on this team. Like, and then has Saban lost his touch a little bit? Like, just we'll see. Like with the penalties.
Not to pick on him. And if you just let me say something else. Not to pick on him, but I've been calling out Darian Dalcourt for about 3 years now. He was one of the worst graded offensive linemen. Him and Chris Owens have been the offensive line has been in decline 2 years in a row. So I mean, if you're going to pick, that's a place to pick too. It is not moved at all. It is not moved up in the stock market.
And when I look at the schedule, like I'll say, Middle Tennessee at home is a win. At South Florida is a win. I'll even say Tennessee at home with revenge is a win. Chattanooga at home is a win. But like, if I look at the other 8 games, like, could I see them losing at home to Texas? Yes. Could I see them losing at home to Ole Miss? Yes. Like, at Miss State, probably a win. But like, I will think about it now because of this quarterback position. I'll mark that a win at Miss State. I'm low on Miss State. At Texas A&M, certainly could be a loss. Arkansas at home, Arkansas will probably give them a game, but we'll call it a win. LSU at home could be a loss. At Kentucky, if they after the week after LSU, could be a tricky game. At Auburn in the finale, that's going to be tricky. So like, I just went through 3, 4, 5, 6 spots where I could see losses. Now they're going to lose all those games, but I normally would not say that with other Alabama teams, and that's because either the quarterback position lately has been so shored up with Bryce Young, or in the past when the quarterback position there wasn't questions in multiple other spots on this roster, which I think there is. Now they're super talented. Like, from a talent perspective, they're still a top 5 team. We'll see if they can put it together. I project them at 10.2. It's a no play for me. But I do think looking at this division in the SEC, I'm going to say, do they win the West? I'm going to say no, because I bet another team to win the West, and it is not LSU.
Shit! Snap, for real?
Yep. So we'll get to mine eventually. A lot of other potential teams, but we'll go to LSU next. Your beloved Tigers.
Oh yeah,
who are plus 450 to win the SEC, plus 175 to win the West. Over 9.5, minus 125 at BetMGM. They draw Florida at home and at Missouri from the SEC East. I think they are one of 2 SEC teams with the same quarterback, head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator returning out of 14. Daniels is back at quarterback with 5 receivers who had at least 20 receptions last year, including tight end Mason Taylor. You expect the offensive line, led by Will Campbell, to be better. The defense does have some questions, but you get Perkins back. You get Mason Perkins, who's just a freak. He's going to be playing a new position, but which I'm sure you'll talk about. Mason Smith comes back from an ACL injury, which will help some of the D-line losses. I think secondary is probably the biggest question. They are going to be extremely reliant on the transfer portal to plug some of those holes. The offense did seem to peak at the end of last year. I'll let you, before I kind of maybe poke some holes in LSU, I'll let you kind of gush over Brian Kelly and the Tigers, who you're backing. I saw them in your round robin playoff parlay. My prediction, I didn't mind Penn State in there. I didn't mind, who else did you have in there? Penn State,
Texas,
didn't mind Texas in there.
LSU, Clemson.
Jesus. No, I'm gonna say, I mean, I could see Clemson.
That tweet.
I'm gonna say LSU ruins.
So much hate.
I'm gonna say LSU ruins your round robin. I mean, other teams could too, but I do not see LSU as a playoff team. Yes, they were 10-4 last year, but 3-1 one possession games. You dig under the hood, it's like I don't think the defense is there yet. I don't love the wide receiver room as much as others do. I don't know if Daniels is ready yet to take that full next step as an elite quarterback that can make all the throws accurately downfield. This is a team that should have lost to Auburn. We're down big to Mississippi State. Lucky win against Alabama. Should have lost to Arkansas. I mean, if Arkansas had a quarterback, they would have beat them. And they win in the bowl when Purdue just sits their entire fucking team. So I think the love for LSU has gone too far. LSU, I met some amazing people from Baton Rouge that have come to visit our bars up here. So I might be in the doghouse with LSU fans. I know you won't. You'll carry the passionate LSU fan part of our podcast. But you look at their schedule, they get Florida State in Orlando to start the year. I think they lose that game. But they're at Mississippi State, week 3, Arkansas, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Auburn at home, Army at home, bye, then at Alabama, Florida, Georgia State, Texas A&M at home to close the year. Decent schedule. I'm going to say you avoid Georgia and Tennessee from the East. Final 3 games at home. That Florida State game is huge in terms of playoff implications because it's just going to be tough to go through. Regardless if I think they got a schedule break overall, it's going to be hard if you lose that game to then go through an entire SEC schedule without another loss, including Alabama at Alabama with revenge. And we know how dominant Alabama has been at home. But what do you see with LSU? Why do you love these Tigers?
Yeah, I love that you pointed out the LSU-Arkansas game last year when the Razorback ground crew decided to spray the field with water in icy conditions. That was a Cade Fortin special there.
Oh, by the way, LSU did lose on a missed extra point to Florida State before, which was an unlucky before Florida LSU fans jumped down my throat.
Yeah.
Look ahead.
Yeah, I love this team. The day after the national title game, I wrote a piece for Action Network saying that my pick for next year is 25-1 LSU. Now, obviously, that number's not there, so I'm not going to go around and sit there and say, hey, go grab that. I have not budged on this. I've thought about it every month. Oh, I think I thought about this every day. There is so much about this team that I love. And I said when Brian Kelly took the position, if you give me 5 years, it could be shorter than that. If you give me 5 years, I will bet LSU national title 5 times. He will win one. Maybe this is it. I don't know why he's giving out injury information. That threw me for a loop. I'd prefer you didn't. I prefer, I found out on the side who's hurt. But that's going to be interesting. So there's a lot to love about this team. 70% of the offensive line snaps are back. Will Campbell might be the best left tackle in the nation. They were number 1 in stuff rate last year. The line was loaded with freshmen last year. Number 1 in stuff rate. I'll take it. You mentioned Perkins over on the defensive side of the ball. Harold Perkins was the number 1 pass rush graded linebacker in all of PFF. That's pass rush. He's an animal against the run. Where he had a weakness was coverage. What does Brian Kelly do? He goes out to Oregon State. He grabs Omar Speights, one of the best coverage backers out there. Not so much against the rush, but he is good against the pass. And the other thing is you mentioned this roster transformation. They had 15,000 brand new snaps, number 1 out of the transfer portal last year. And they still were able to go to the SEC championship game. Just the coaching of Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock as offensive coordinator, Matt House, who I don't know how he is still on this coaching staff and not back in the NFL. It's an elite coaching staff. They were the 10th best in FBS special teams. They pay attention to detail. They pay attention to every detail. They had the number 6 ranked national recruiting class. They were first in the transfer portal again. So I expect the same thing. 9th and 3rd down conversions on offense. I think we'll see it again. It could be better. Why? Because Jaden Daniels has put on 20 pounds of muscle. You want to run inside zone all day? Well, good. Your quarterback put on 20 pounds. If he gets hurt, Garrett Nussmeier opened at 60-1 for the Heisman, dropped all the way to 20-1 in Vegas. That's a ridiculous number for a backup quarterback, but that just shows you the love for this team. So they have it on both sides of the ball. They have the stats. There's not a crack in this team. I know that you're kind of pointing to things from last year, but I will point to the fact that it was a brand new roster with an offensive line filled with freshmen, and Harold Perkins was, Mason Smith and Sevion Jones are 6'6" on the defensive line, right? You're going to put a quarterback in there that's 5'11" or shorter to try to throw over that? They're loaded. 79% on offense, 64% on defense. They were 27th in defensive finishing drives. That's coaching. That's players. That's Matt House, who has one of the highest success rates of creating pressure at 56% when LSU decides to blitz. They are too deep every position. This is my pick to win the SEC West. This is my pick to be Georgia in the SEC championship. Go Tigers.
Completely disagree. I think Kelly's getting it on the right direction, and this was a team that was a couple quarterbacks away from starting games. So O'Connell, Jefferson, a couple coin flips that went their way from going 7-6 last year. And
It wasn't pretty
The
at times. That
the
Tennessee game was
tune
bad.
the tune would be oh yeah, that was you were I think you were on
Oh,
LSU
I
that
was
game.
on it big time. It was the best bet of the podcast, and they came out and gave up 3 touchdowns, fumbled on every special teams play.
I was all over my balls. I disagree. I think you're way higher, but that's the beauty of the preseason. One of us will be right on LSU. I have another team that I'm higher than the market on in the SEC West that I bet to win the SEC West, and it's not the next team, Texas A&M. So you still have to wait.
Yeah, you had me
Texas A&M, Texas A&M 14-1 to win the SEC plus 550 to win the division. Over 8 minus 140 at BetMGM. They draw a road game at Tennessee, home against South Carolina from the SEC East. They do host Alabama, but go to LSU. The big news in the offseason is the hiring of Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator. The offense has been just an absolute disaster as far as just, all these modern offenses. Texas A&M's way behind the curve. Conservative, old dinosaur Jimbo offense. The hope is that Petrino will get the reins here and call a more modern scheme and kind of unleash some of the talent that this Texas A&M team does have and continues to recruit. Last year, they finished 5-7 after being preseason top 10. They did go 2-5 in one possession games. 5 of their 7 losses were by 6 points or less, in fairness. They do return 20 starters, 10 on each side of the ball. There's a quarterback battle, but I think Connor Weigman will probably win it. He started 4 times last year. Haynes King transferred, Max Johnson also in the fold. The one starter they do lose on offense is Devin Achane, the really good running back. Offensive line returns a lot of experience, but it was a mess last year. Can they get that together? The defense couldn't stop any running back, no matter who they were. They just got ran all over. Their pass D was great, but it didn't matter. No one would throw on them. You just run all over them, and then you lose your top defensive back in Antonio Johnson and a couple others. They're hoping the secondary gets beefed up with transfers. Special teams has a chance to be pretty special. And Smith returns at receiver, and he'll be great as a returner as well.
Big return.
It's a brutal road schedule. They go at Miami week 2, at Tennessee, at Ole Miss, at LSU in the finale. But that's it. It's only a handful true road games because they also get Arkansas in Arlington. Their home games are against New Mexico, ULM, Auburn, Alabama. That's the big one. South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Abilene Christian. So a lot of winnable home games in front of the 12th man. Texas A&M, on paper, it's a team that, hey, look, a lot of talent. Last year, they kind of underperformed, unlucky in some metrics. Big offensive coordinator hire. It's on paper would be normally a bounce back year and a team to buy on. What are your thoughts on the Aggies?
I was told in the spring that Bobby Petrino would not be calling plays. I said, that's not true. There's no way you made this hire. I mean, let's just get right into it because I could break down the offense. I could break down the defense. It doesn't matter because what is going to set Texas A&M to elite level is Bobby Petrino calling plays in his offense. You don't believe me? Go check out what Missouri State did to Arkansas last year for 3 quarters. Had Sam Pittman back on his heels, had Barry Odom looking for a new job, had Razorback Nation wanting to get the old broken motorcycle out and get Petrino back on the road. I mean, you want to see how to beat SEC defenses? You got the guy. And then the rumor, which it wasn't a rumor, I was told by a very credible source he's not going to call plays. I thought to myself, why in the Sam hell would Bobby Petrino take a job where he's not calling plays? He's a great quarterback. I expect Connor Weigman. I expect Max Johnson to improve big time. Max Johnson has never been behind an offensive line that hasn't protected him yet. LSU, Texas, it doesn't matter. That guy, poor kid, has never had a clean pocket. So we'll see. I think the quarterback play is going to be extremely improved. The question is, are they running pro-style Jimbo with papers floating all over the field, or are we spreading it out and going power spread? And don't ask me, Jimbo Fisher, if I've seen Bobby Petrino call an offense. Ryan Mallett, Booby Nile Davis. Yeah, I've seen a little bit of Petrino offense in my days, and it's way different than what Jimbo calls. And that's the question. What formation are we lining up in with this offense, and who's calling the plays? So I hear that from a credible source. Then Jimbo cuts an interview late May. And I swear to God, from my poker days, if I was playing poker against this guy, I'd have shoved all in. He's twitching, he's scratching, he can't concentrate. He's all over the place. Now, Jimbo always kind of mutters his words and runs over himself, but he just can't get over this question. We get to media days. I'm the first hand up. I stand up. We're going to see Bobby Petrino's power spread, or we're going to see the pro style of Jimbo Fisher. And he says, well, I said something about play action. He's like, well, you never seen Bobby Petrino's offense before? You haven't seen play action from Bobby? Completely dodges it, says, we're not going to talk schematics. I'm not going to talk that. There's no way I'm going to get on that. The entire room stands up, and that's all they talked about for 15 minutes was pinging him about this offense. He won't answer the question. He has told everybody in every interview, stop asking me. We're not going to tell you what we're doing. But he did let it slip out in the side room at media days that I am open to suggestion from Bobby. You're open to suggestion from one of the best offensive minds in college football? I don't care that he's an asshole, or that he was with a volleyball player, or that he's on a bike, or that he dismantled the Louisville program, or that he flirted with Auburn. I don't give a shit about anything. This is one of the best offensive minds in the nation in FBS, and you're not going to let him have full input? You're not going to give him the Drinkwitz nature with Kirby Moore at Missouri and say, it's all yours, go? I can't bet on Texas A&M until I know this, and we're not going to know it till they hit the field against Miami. I would think against Miami, you would see what this real offense is going to be week 2. But that is where we're at. I don't care about the math. I make it 7.6. It would go up a full win, maybe more, if Petrino's calling plays. It'd probably go down a game if he isn't, because I'm not going to deal with his Jimbo offense anymore. Quarterbacks will be better. Defense is amazing. Tons of experience. This team can rumble in the West if Bobby Petrino is calling plays. It's a no play for me, and I am going to have so many eyeballs watching this team, and my ears are going to be up for everything that comes out of Jimbo's mouth.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. I think Fisher has too big of an ego, and they're going to clash, and he's not going to let go of the reins of this offense, which I also agree that he should, but I ultimately don't think that he will, and this will not work. I also still have questions about the run D. I think that they miss. Look at what we're seeing, what's going on at Duke and the defensive improvement there with Elko. I think they really miss Elko on the defensive side of the ball. And if they don't let Petrino take over the offense, now they're missing Elko. Still have questions about that run D. You lose some really important guys in the secondary. I don't love who they brought in the secondary, transfer-wise. A lot of big names with pedigree and starting experience, but don't love that. Now, the schedule, I think, broke their way in a lot of ways. I'm a little higher than you, but no play for me at 8. If you want to have some fun, though, bet the under and hope it all goes to shit like it did last year.
One more thing.
They flash buy signals, but I can't.
I know. It's all flashing by for us. One more thing on the social dynamic of the coordinators. You mentioned the defense not being able to stop the run. DJ Durkin coming in last year had never called a 4-2-5 in his life. The 4-2-5 was Elko's. Elko leaves. Durkin comes in. Durkin's never called a 4-2-5 in his life. Jimbo says, we're still running a 4-2-5, and Durkin's just going to call the 4-2-5. Why did you hire somebody who's never run it before? So now translate that to this year. Are you expecting Bobby Petrino to come in and improve your offensive personnel, formation, schemes, and not his version of the offense? I think that's what's happening, Stuck. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, Fisher has that natty, and that's I think and he can play at all times. That's his card. But I think that he needs to evolve a little bit. But he hasn't shown that ability in the past. Maybe he will this year, but I agree with you. We have to see it first before we will believe it. All right, let's move on in the SEC West and go to Oxford. Ole Miss 50-1 to win the SEC, 25-1 to win the division at BetMGM. Over 7.5 is their win total. They go to Georgia and get Vandy at home from the SEC East. This is the team I'm buying.
Oh my God.
The SEC West.
Kidding me.
Not the SEC. This is sort of a play, sort of like last year with Tennessee, 14-1 to win the division, which had a ton of life at one point.
All right.
And it ended up being a historic Georgia team. Let me make my case first.
I'm on the over.
So
this is yours. This is your baby. I'm on the over. I like them, but you go.
Yeah, I like the over. I bet the over too. But Ole Miss, 25-1 to win the division. Look, Alabama has potentially taken a step back, and we don't know their quarterback situation, if that's really going to work out. There's other holes on that roster that we haven't seen in years. Super talented, still a top 5 team, but they could take a step back this year. LSU, you love them. I still have questions about Daniels. They were extremely fortunate last year, very close to being a 7-6 team. You don't face a couple backups, a couple coin flips against Auburn, Alabama don't go your way. Who knows? The hype isn't there yet. I still have questions about the secondary, the wide receivers. Can Daniels be that elite quarterback? Texas A&M, we talked about. Dirk, the Elko loss is big. We don't think that Petrino is actually going to get the reins of the offense, and that's really going to hold back Texas A&M. Okay, so there's 3 teams at the top of that division, all with potential flaws. And then there's Ole Miss. And for what it's worth, Ole Miss hosts LSU, and they host Texas A&M, and they go to Alabama. So they're home for 2 of those 3. Now, they're at Georgia, and as far as their win total is concerned, I said I went under 11.5 on Georgia. I think Georgia's going to get to win the division, get the SEC title, lose 1 game. If Ole Miss steals that game, if that's the 1 game, and they have the offense that could potentially do it, that's the sleepy spot. And that could be the first offense, the real offense that Georgia plays all year, for what it's worth. If they steal that game, then that affords. Then, by the way, I don't think they'll beat Georgia a second time, which is why I like the division. So I could see them beating Georgia in the regular season, no chance in the SEC title. But that would help their case to win the division. But I just think there's too much value with this offense. They actually have returning production, and I love one of the reasons why that I love this Ole Miss team is I love the transfers that they brought in. It's like every transfer that I loved that went into the portal, even if it's second tier guys, Ole Miss got them.
You love Spencer.
I love the defensive. I for depth, yeah. Jackson Dart has to take that next step for this, but in the second year, full year in Lane Kiffin's system, I think he will. And I've read and heard nothing but good things. We'll see. If he'll end up proving it. Defensive coordinator hire. First of all, I love some of the transfers they brought in. Depth isn't great, but they were running a Mickey Mouse clown show scheme on defense before. That's not going to be the case this year. I think they needed actually some structure on that defense, but they actually have returning production. And Kiffin just crushed the portal. And I think Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M are potentially, not saying they are, but they're potentially flawed. And I'm a little lower on those teams and see the cracks where Ole Miss can take advantage. They host 2 of those 3 teams. And there might be a little bit more chaos in the West that some are thinking where like 2 wins and then it comes down to tiebreakers and those home games could matter. I'm buying Kiffin. I'm buying a defensive improvement. It's not going to be great, but just schematically, and I like some of the guys they brought in. I'm buying Ole Miss at 25-1. To win the division. Call me crazy.
I'm not. I make it 8.5. I like the over 7.5. Quinshon Judkins created 82 missed tackles last year. He's impossible, right? Him and Raheem Sanders are just impossible. You're loaded at the quarterback position. You have 87% of your offensive line snaps returning. Schedule
130 plus starts coming back on the O-line.
130 plus starts. And when you switch over to the defensive side, I actually do have positives to talk about. 76% of your experience comes back on the defensive side of the ball. You were 10th in defending rush explosives. Now, you were talking about Mickey Mouse defense. That's right. It was protect explosives at all costs. So we'll see if Pete Golding is going to be aggressive. He was 32% blitz throughout his career, calling defenses for Alabama. He had 48% success. That's about mid-range in FBS. But yeah, it's going to be a change, and I think it's going to be for the better. 8.5 wins is no joke with this schedule. I mean, you drew Georgia from the East. That's no fun. I think Bama and Georgia are the teams that I mathematically place out of range as a win. That doesn't mean they can't win them. That just means they're double-digit underdogs. Other than that, small dog to LSU. I have Ole Miss as a favorite against Tulane, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Auburn. And games against Georgia Tech, Vandy, ULM, Mercer, kind of a bye week type treatment. I love the over in this. I think they can make.
Yeah, I mean, look,
they got to grab one, Stuck, though. They got to grab one of the big boys.
Yep.
But it's an easy.
Yeah, they can. I see because Yeah, but I also look. They get LSU and Texas A&M at home. I like going to Alabama early with their quarterback questions before they get it sorted out. If I was going to choose where that game is on the schedule, that's where I would want it. And look, I think they're going to play a lot more 3-4 than 4-2-5, and I love all their linebacker transfers. They just wanted to prevent explosives. Pete Golding, the last 3 years of Alabama, #1, I think, every year in preventing explosive plays while trying to create more havoc, which is what they need to do. They just need to, in these big games, they need to create negative plays and get some turnovers and then let their offense cook. You know that Kiffin is going to have this offense cooking all year. So, yeah, I think that there's value. I am on the over with you, and I sprinkled on the 25-1 that win the division. I think they have to win 2 of 3 at Alabama, at Georgia. Excuse me, at Alabama, LSU at home, Texas A&M at home. They have to win 2 of those 3 and then maybe win at Georgia, but they might not need to because I think that there's going to be a little bit more chaos in the West than some think. So, yeah, give me 25-1 to win the division with the Rebels. I've been against the Rebels for the last couple of years. I'm with them this year.
I didn't even realize that LSU playing Arkansas at the end of September is going to have to deal with Bo Limmer, who I just tweeted out today is squatting 700 freaking pounds. KJ Jefferson and Raheem Sanders against that LSU defensive front. And then they have to turn around the next week and go up against Judkins. That's a huge advantage for Ole Miss. That's a huge advantage that Arkansas offense gets to pound on the LSU defensive front 7 before. I didn't even think of that till now, but what a big game.
Look at you already coming around on
September 30th, you and I.
Rebels. Yeah, I can't wait for that. September 30th. Is that what it is? September 30th?
Yeah, September 30th.
Yep, September 30th. Yeah, Ole Miss. And by the way, the best part about this bet, 25-1. We'll know by the end of September because at Alabama and LSU in back-to-back weeks.
We're doing the Vegas steak dinner. Loser September 30th. All right.
Yep. That's in. We're in on steak dinner on that game. I got the Rebs. You got the Tigers. All right, let's move on. The time has come. The Arkansas Razorbacks, 100-1 to win the SEC, 40-1 to win the SEC West. Win total over 6.5 -150 at BetMGM. They draw a road game at Florida and a home game against Missouri from the SEC East. KJ Jefferson back. Great running back room. Questions at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Questions on the offensive line. Do we trust Pittman no matter what, though, there? Questions at tight end. You lose your top 4 receivers. A lot of turnover on the offensive line. New defensive coordinator as well. Interior, maybe a question. You lose a lot on the back end. So the question for you is, I like some of the transfers in the secondary for what it's worth.
Yep.
Dan Enos, offensive coordinator. Travis Williams, the new defensive coordinator. And Sam Pittman with this rebuilt offensive line. Can Arkansas improve on a 7-6 year last year? Keep in mind, they were 0-3 when KJ was sidelined. What do you think of this Razorback team, who does have a pretty easy non-con to get things started? And they get Missouri and Florida from the East, but they start with Western Carolina, Kent State, who might be worse than Western Carolina, BYU at home, and then FIU at home. Sandwich between Auburn and Missouri at home. So good finish, good start. It's the middle. You got to go 6-0. I mean, to feel really good about going over 6.5 because you're middle. at least 5-1. Your middle is at LSU, Texas A&M in Auburn, in Arlington, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, Mississippi State at home after that horrible stretch, and Mississippi State's off of a bye to boot.
Yeah.
And then you get a bye, then you're at Florida. That is
which I don't
the
think
hardest
has ever won at Florida, ever.
Yeah, that's the hardest 6-game stretch in college football, folks. So schedule is just like, all right, let's get things started. We should do that well. And then if we can survive, we have a nice soft landing. But can they survive that middle? We're not Dan Enos guys.
No.
What are your thoughts on your Hogs?
No, I am blocked by Dan Enos on Twitter. I've never personally said anything about him. I have never tagged him in a tweet. As a matter of fact, I try to stay as professional as possible on my Twitter. I always have. Why Dan Enos has blocked me? I think it's because of our Action Network social team put a video together of me calling Dan Enos out on a podcast. I guess he got wind of that, and I got blocked back in 2018. And I believe it's because Arkansas lost to Toledo at home, and Dan Enos could not beat a Toledo team he used to coach against when he was at Central Michigan. I do not like Dan Enos as a coach. His tenure at the end of Arkansas was bad. His tenure at Alabama was worse. It had Saban running around the locker room saying, "Where the fuck is Dan?" Because Dan packed his stuff and went to Miami, which didn't go well either. Then Dan ends up on what? Maryland? I mean, this guy, you and I said this before, you and I have had this job for 6 years. Dan Enos has had 6 jobs since you and I have been doing this. So was I happy about the hire? No. I knew it was going to happen, though, because Pittman never threw Kendall Briles under the bus last year, but the play calling was not what Pittman wanted. It's not what I want. It's not what any of us wanted. Some of the decision-making with KJ, and KJ was frustrated too. The play calling was not good. So we knew a new offensive coordinator was coming in. When he picked Dan Enos, I was pretty upset about it. But then I went and remembered that Sam Pittman was the offensive line coach for offensive coordinator Dan Enos on the 2015 Arkansas Razorback offense.
We're about to enter the spin zone.
That offense with Brandon Allen and Alex Collins, Buda Collins, finished second in SP+. That offense was a powder keg. And I think Pittman made an easy decision saying, I've had a lot of success with Dan Enos before. Let's get the spread coast in here. Inside, outside zone with KJ. We got the best center in the SEC. Let's roll. Outside of Brady Latham over at left guard, the rest of the offensive line is a question mark. Low on experience. So that.
Yeah. So are you trusting Pittman? That's his specialty. That
Right.
he'll get this together, or are there too many questions where we can't really trust it?
Because the offense last year lost Treylon Burks. They never identified Hazelwood. They never identified anybody on the outside that could be a target for KJ. And they still made the offense work because Rocket Sanders is an absolute animal. And Pittman cut an interview today, maybe yesterday, and someone asked him that Raheem Sanders is now weighing 242 pounds. How do you feel about him coming in overweight? And Pittman's laughing. Did you see this stuff? Pittman's laughing. Overweight?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah. So he comes in 242, which I think is like 20 pounds more. Yeah, he's listed 225. He came in at 242. And Pittman's laughing. He says, yeah, I went up to him and tried to pinch him. I can't get a single piece of skin off his body. There's zero fat on him. Rocket Sanders is going to mow over everybody. And that's the offense. That's the entire offense. KJ looked super slim at media days. So you're right. There's no targets, but there were no targets last year either. And they struggled. But the real problem last year was the defense. And there's a lot of things going on in the defense. I'm not sure how much I should talk about here. There were some issues on Dixon Street. There was an arrest that I think the Fayetteville police got. I think they overstepped their boundaries with what they did to Slusher. And I think it caused a little bit of riff in the locker room. And that's why you saw that secondary all hit the portal. That's why you saw a mass exit of defensive players. They didn't want them in the locker room. Didn't match with what they wanted to do. New defensive coordinator comes in. I got to media days. I got to ask Pittman about Travis Williams coming in because Travis Williams is crazy. He calls an unbelievable amount of blitz when he was at Central Florida for Gus Malzahn. And if you guys saw at SEC Media Days, I made Sam Pittman laugh. He's like, yeah, I watched that tape of Travis Williams. And I told him, I said, you can't run cover zero here. You got to leave a guy back. And then he full out admitted, we are done with the Barry Odom, rush 3, drop 8. We are now aggressive behind the line of scrimmage. Arkansas's defense is going to be boom or bust. It's going to pay off against some of the teams. They're going to give up a lot of explosive plays. They're going to have a lot of sacks. So that's the new Arkansas defense. I project them 7.2. I'm not saying I believe in Dan Enos, but the chemistry between Dan Enos and Sam Pittman did earn them, with a Fayetteville High School quarterback, the second best offense in SP Plus in 2015. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt. Pittman is 22-12 against the spread. He makes us all money. Projected 7.2. I'm over 6.5. I'm over 7 plus money. Woo Pig Suey. I think 7 win. 8 is the ceiling for me. But I really think that I just don't see a path to them getting to 6. 7 wins, either pushes or cashes tickets. Let's go.
All right, heard it here first. Over on Arkansas. Let's move on to Auburn or Eagle. 66-1 to win the SEC, 30-1 to win the SEC West. Win total sitting at over 6.5 minus 125 at BetMGM. They draw a home game against Georgia and a road game against Vanderbilt from the SEC East. The big news down at Auburn: Hugh Freeze, the turnaround artist, has arrived to turn this program around, which I think he will do eventually. I think that they're going to become more competitive, and that's going to lead to better recruiting classes. That's going to fix some of the trenches that we see from the past regimes, that the residual effect, you looked at some of the linemen that Auburn's been getting over the past couple of years, like 2-3 stars. Hugh Freeze, I think, is going to turn this program around. It's all he's ever done. This year might be a tougher, taller ask. I think I heard you hint on the last podcast that you love this Auburn team. They have a quarterback battle going on, mainly because Peyton Thorne transferred in there from Michigan State after the spring. Probably thought he had a chance to potentially start, and also saw potentially how bad things could get at Michigan State. A new defensive coordinator, Ron Roberts, comes in from Baylor. New offensive coordinator comes in with Hugh Freeze. That's Philip Montgomery from Tulsa. You can see a spread RPO system. Already have a top 20 recruiting class in here. Do you trust Peyton Thorne? If not, Robbie Ashford, can he actually throw the ball? He should be a good fit for this offense just with his mobility. They're loaded at running back even after losing Bigsby. Offensive line needs to be better. At least they're a year older. A lot of upperclassmen. Wide receiver, also a big unknown. So there's certainly some questions on this team. What do you see with Auburn, who obviously has a tough schedule? You got, home games against Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. That's tough when you have those games at home. Then you're at Texas A&M. You're at Arkansas. You do start with UMass in a very winnable game at Cal before another win at home against Samford. You also have New Mexico State towards the end of the year at home. So really should be 4-0. At Cal maybe is kind of tricky, but we're both down on Cal. You should be 4-0 non-con. You're at Vandy, you're at Arkansas. So a lot of these teams that you maybe could beat are on the road, and then these tough teams are all at home. And they've been great at home. Last year they were a disaster on the road, which makes it tough. What do you see with Auburn over 6.5 minus 125?
Did you know this is the best coach in the SEC? So where that's coming from is there was an interview that Lane Kiffin cut on SEC Network last year. It didn't get a lot of pub. It didn't get a lot of play. Somebody asked about who is the best game day coach in college football, and he immediately said, it's Hugh Freeze. He said nobody is more prepared on game day as a coach, as a manager of the roster, as halftime adjustments as Hugh Freeze. That's a big statement from Lane Kiffin. So when he got this job, immediately it flashed in my brain, well, he just brought a Liberty defense to Arkansas and beat Arkansas. And he's bringing that entire staff. Josh Aldridge was a defensive coordinator. Now he's over as a position coach. because Hugh Freeze decided to go out and get Ron Roberts, who has been with Dave Aranda for the last 3 years. Poor Ron Roberts got fired because I think Aranda had to have a sacrificial lamb after the defense that Baylor had last year. The defensive staff produced miracles at Liberty with what they were able to do. And now they're all here. They get 70% of the defense back. All these numbers, I'm not going to point to stats from last year under the Brian Harsin era. They're terrible. They're god-awful for the talent that was on this team. But this coaching staff has proven that they can pull a rabbit out of a hat. Now, I'm switching to the offensive side of the ball, where Jarquez Hunter was the 7th highest elusive running back per PFF. The offensive line, completely bolstered by transfers from Tulsa. Well, how did they get transfers from Tulsa on the offensive line? Because Philip Montgomery is now the offensive coordinator. And if you look into his background, he was the quarterback coach for RG3. Now he gets Robbie Ashford. You better well bet you when they run RPO, Robbie Ashford's going to be in there doing some damage. When they run a run under center, play action pass, hit someone deep, we've seen Peyton Thorne hit, Naylor and Reed 50 yards down the field. He can drop a dime. So you have two quarterbacks that do two different things better than I would say the Alabama quarterbacks that we talked about earlier on this podcast. I mean, would you take Ashford over Milroe? I would, from a havoc allowed perspective. Coaching staff, I believe in 100% on both sides of the ball. Quarterback room, I believe in. Jarquez Hunter, I believe in. 80% of their tackles and stops return from an experience perspective. Their recruiting is on fire. I make the number 7.9. The win totals came out.
Wow.
The win totals came out on the day of the Kentucky Derby. My poor wife, I said, bye. She goes, where are you going? It's Saturday. We're going to hang out. No, we're not. I'm driving up to Kansas. I have to make legal bets, and I have to go to Kansas to get it. Because I got a few dimes down on the Auburn over. So over 6, yes. It's not there anymore. Over 6.5, yes. Over 7, yes. I stopped buying at 7.5. It's not there. You can get over 6.5. You get an alternate 7. I'm a big believer in Auburn. Win total perspective, they're not. I don't know if they can beat Georgia and Alabama. They could beat Alabama in the last game of the year in the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen in that game. But they're going to beat UMass, Cal, Samford, Vandy, and New Mexico State. That's 5 wins. No questions asked. They're going to be a small favorite to Mississippi State. We haven't got there yet, but I'm going to count that as a win at 6. Then I just need one as a small underdog to Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Arkansas. I like my chances. Why? Because if I get to 6 wins, I can hedge out of it. That's why I drove up and put a whole bunch of dimes on them during the Kentucky Derby. I believe in this team from a coaching perspective and a roster perspective. War Eagle.
All right, there you have it. Over on Auburn. It's passed for me, but I don't hate your argument. I'm curious to see how the quarterback position shakes out. You can't just bring in Thorne to throw it and Ashford to run it. So there's going to have to be some, but a guy, if there's one guy who can figure it out, it is Freeze. The last team in the SEC West to get to, and it's the last team of the college football betting preview, Mississippi State. We will finish up in Cowbell Town, 100-1 to win the SEC, 50-1 to win the SEC West. Over 6 flat. They draw Kentucky at home and at South Carolina from the SEC East. They do, I believe, let me pull up their schedule here. They host Alabama. They host LSU. And they host Ole Miss. That's not great. They do have I love the Miss State home field advantage, but those are 3 of the toughest teams in the SEC, and you're hosting them all, which means your road games, which you want to pick up wins in the SEC, are at South Carolina, at Arkansas, at Auburn, at Texas A&M. They do have a very reasonable non-con. They're at home against Southeast Louisiana, home against Arizona, home against Western Michigan, who's dreadful, and then home against Southern Miss late in the year before they host Ole Miss in the finale Egg Bowl. I have questions about this team. There's a new offensive coordinator. First of all, RIP Mike Leach, just a legend, my favorite coach of all time. It's going to be a new offensive scheme here. You'll have more balance. You have a good offensive line here with 113 starts coming back, 4 starters, but it's another scheme change. Will Rogers, another scheme. It's going to be more of like a balanced attack, I assume, under Barbe. I have major secondary questions after losing Forbes and company. I think that's really going to hurt. So, yeah, they are one of only 7 schools with a 13-plus year bowl streak. That, I think, might be in question this year. I think their absolute ceiling is 6 wins. This is an under that I really like. I'm usually a Miss State buyer, was last year. After a 9-4 year last year, things broke their way to regression candidate. But with all of the change, I'm selling Mississippi State. Give me the under here, 6.5 or 6.
100%.
Thoughts?
100%. You're correct. I wanted to wait till I got to media days to see Zach Arnett handle the podium. This conference is full of alpha head coaches, the best in the nation. I want to see how Zach Arnett handled himself, and I wanted to talk to him off in the side rooms and the other media rooms. I'm not going to interject any, narrative or anything. I'm just going to say the only thought that came to my brain was he's not ready for this. Offensive coordinator hire of Kevin Barbe is coming from Appalachian State. Before that, he was at Central Michigan. He averages a 56% run rate. That is a massive jump from 32% under Mike Leach. So we have an offensive line unproven that's going to go through blocking change schemes. We talked about this with Oklahoma State. I am not a fan of changing how the offensive line blocks this drastic. I mean, this is almost double. If you take Kevin Barbe and what he's done in his previous stops, App State and Central Michigan, it's almost double what Mississippi State ran last year. Huge.
And this is how, after Will Rogers and this offensive line had basically like mastered the previous scheme.
Yeah. The defense, which is Zach Arnett's specialty, massive pass breakup and pressures loss, almost all of them. 10% returns. 10%. I don't think I've seen that number that low on any team in college football. So, can Mississippi State beat App State on offense? I would say no. Can the defense recover from only returning 10% of their PBUs and their pressures? I would say no. Portal, 48th in portal ranking. Now, I didn't bring that up with any other team, and I really haven't brought that up on a lot of other podcasts, unless you were number 1 like USC and LSU. I bring up being 48th because you're implementing new schemes on both sides. Well, the defense needs help in the secondary, and you didn't grab anybody. The offense is a new scheme, and you didn't bring anybody in. Mike Wright comes in from Vandy. I guess he's going to get an RPO package behind Will Rogers. Like, when is he going to play? He's not going to run whatever Will Rogers is running is not going to be what Mike Wright is running from Vanderbilt. That didn't make any sense to me. This defense completely fell off the grid last year. They finished 123rd in pass rush. That's supposed to be Zach Arnett's specialty. I don't agree with anything that's going on here, Stock. I'm taking under on the 6.5. Mathematically, I make it 6. I think it's going to end up lower. This, Dan Mullen was very prideful. He was very prideful in the fact that besides his first season, he never finished in the cellar with Mississippi State. He never did. You look at all the state. Can you believe that? The Bulldogs never finished in the cellar of the SEC West. They are going to this year.
Yep, I agree. All right, that'll do it for us. But before we get out of here, we have one final 3 and out of the SEC conference betting, of the college football conference betting previews. So let's start with first down. It's our favorite over or future. Con, I'll let you start.
I'm going to do 2 overs real quick. I'm going to say Auburn and Arkansas, both on the over on their win total. I like the hires that both teams have made. Head coaching perspective from Auburn. They have the pieces in place that Brian Harsin just didn't know how to use. Look out for Jarquez Hunter running the ball. Look out for that defensive staff that's coming over from Liberty that beat Arkansas last year for Auburn. Take the over with them. And then with Arkansas, listen, it's pretty easy. KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders and their center Bo Limmer, who squats 700 pounds, is going to run over a ton of defenses. I project them at 7.2. They have massive upgrades in the secondary. They have a new aggressive defensive style. It's going to give up explosive plays, but they're going to have a lot of sacks and a lot of tackles for loss. I like the over on both of those teams, Auburn and Arkansas.
All right, I'll give you something a little spicier. I'll give you Ole Miss 25-1 to win the division. I see some potential cracks at the top of this division, not as high on LSU as you. Alabama could take a step back, especially if their quarterback situation isn't sorted out. And Texas A&M, it still could be a complete mess, especially if Jimbo doesn't let go of the reins of that offense. And the defense, I still think, has questions, and they really do miss Mike Elko. Who could take advantage? Ole Miss. They actually have returning production to go along with all of the portal additions that Lane Kiffin is going to bring in. The offense is going to be great. I actually think the defense could take a step up this year, and all they need to do is just be a little better, generate some havoc, get some takeaways, which I think they can do with a new defensive coordinator, Golding, who will come in, I think, just improve this defense schematically. They host LSU, they host Texas A&M, they get Alabama on the road, but it's early in the year. I think there's value in Ole Miss, not only in over of their win total, but a little sprinkle 25-1 to win the division. Let's go Lane. All right, let's move on to second down, and that's our favorite under of the SEC West. Colin, kick things off.
Yeah, I think you and I are going to agree, but I'm going to go Mississippi State on the under, and I'll focus on the offensive side of the ball in case Stuckey wants to take it too. So Mississippi State is bringing in a new offensive coordinator, and they're completely changing schemes from what Mike Leach did with the air raid. Kevin Barbay comes in after stops at App State, Central Michigan. They're going to up their rush rate from 32% up to 56%. But you didn't go out and help the offensive line and the running backs and anyone that's familiar with this system whatsoever. It's a huge change to ask the offensive line to go from to go from being a pass blocking team in the air raid to going to a rush first all the time. So give me Mississippi State on the under 6.5. I would even take an under 6 if you can find some juice, some positive juice there.
Yeah, that kind of negates their strength of the returning production along the offensive line with all of those changes. Also impacts Will Rogers, who had mastered that offense that now will be changing. And then on the defensive side of the ball, extreme losses in the secondary that I think will be felt and really impact the production across the board. You already mentioned some of the havoc losses as well. And then I just don't think, look, it's an easy non-conference schedule, but I don't like the way that the conference schedule broke. You're playing all the toughest teams at home, and your winnable games are on paper or on the road. I don't like the way the schedule broke. I think the absolute ceiling for this team is 6 wins. I think they finally do finish in the basement with all of this change. I agree with you on under Mississippi State. All right, that was as fun as I thought it was going to be. Really fun episode. That'll conclude our college football conference betting previews for 2023. If you haven't already checked out the previous 10, make sure you do 11 in total. We will have a Heisman recap episode coming up here before week 0. We'll kind of recap some of our favorite futures and win totals. And then before you know it, we'll be previewing the week 0 slate and then the week 1 slate. And then we will be officially in the midst of the grind. Colin, thanks for joining live from Las Vegas. It's time for us to go find some last-minute winners and grind away the rest of this summer. If you're listening, make sure you enjoy those final weeks before we do start that grind. But appreciate all of you. Appreciate our audio and video producers on the back end. If you haven't already, please leave a 5-star review. We'll do a ton of giveaways before week 0. If you have already, and you can, grab someone else's phone and leave one. I don't care what you say. Any 5-star review will get you in the running for giveaways, which we'll do a ton of. And as always, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. You know the drill. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsor, BetMGM. And we will catch y'all soon. Cheers.
Peace out.